So welcome. Today's episode, we are actually going to be talking about it's the 5 year anniversary of COVID, the pandemic when the world shut down.
Yep.
Um, so looking back, do you remember where you were, Cheryl? It was just a regular day for me, so nothing too crazy, but I really couldn't believe what I was hearing on the news. Like, are we
I
really?
I have a specific day that I remember where the school it was a Friday and a bunch of things happened that day. The school made their official announcement that they were shut down for the next several weeks, and we were actually packed to go camping for my with my Girl Scout troop, and that got
Okay.
canceled. Even though it was camping and we were one of few troops in that area. We didn't, but
That is
nobody
a little weird.
knew.
But
Nobody.
everybody was in panic mode,
They
right?
were, yes. So we pivoted and actually camped in the backyard of one of the mom's houses. And the following month, this is when we began to see in April, like the changes in travel, the changes
Spring
in
break
how things were
canceled.
going.
Yeah.
Spring break, well, kids were remote by this point, and we had a New York trip scheduled with the school that got canceled. We also had a Girl Scout trip that we had been planning for so long, an Alaskan cruise
Oh,
in June that also got officially canceled that April. Travel just changed big
it
time.
did. I do remember we were scheduled to go to Clearwater to go see Winter, the dolphin, and Clearwater Aquarium locked down, quarantined, so we had to cancel that spring break trip. And then we never got to see Winter. She passed away. So
Oh, I
that
have
was
still yet to go on my Alaskan cruise. That is my bucket. I've
sometimes
planned
it
it
just
twice
doesn't
since
pan
then,
out.
and it's fallen apart. So it's
You'll
one of
get
those things.
there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm super excited because Virgin Voyage just announced there,
Yes,
and that's where I'm
girl.
going now. But
Virgin
that's neither here nor
Voyages
there.
cruises to Alaska now. So
But yeah, it's hard to believe
what's
that
up?
it's been 5 years since the lockdown.
I know. So let's go back to when it all early happened. So here's the things that I remember being like so bizarre. Like people were hoarding toilet paper and
Yes.
Lysol wipes.
The
And like
memes, the toilet paper memes were hilarious.
they were funny, and but it was so bad that I would get in touch with the stock people that they're like, we've got a truck of toilet paper because I wasn't hoarding, but I was getting to the point where we were gonna be out of toilet paper and it was nowhere to be found. Like it was
Yeah,
like it was like crazy. It was
right.
beyond crazy. And going to the store and bringing your groceries home and wiping everything down with Lysol wipes. Now, but you didn't know. You didn't know. We
It was
didn't
better to
know.
err on the side of caution, which is what we saw in the travel world too. So many things changed, and then so many things kind of came to the forefront, like Zoom. Zoom blew up
Yes,
during the
Zoom
pandemic,
blew up, and the whole thing was business on top, casual business in the front,
which
party in the back.
since we mostly work from home and mostly work through Zoom and remote, I
Right.
still carry the Kova Couture where I'm dressed from the top and then I've got my PJ pants on the bottom usually, or depending on what time of the day it is, I'll have some leggings or something on. But yeah, I rock the Kova Couture still 5 years later.
Well, and I was the one that refused to do that. I just always got dressed and did my thing. I never took the free pass to just hang out in your pajamas or whatever. That just wasn't my style. I always felt more prepared if I was dressed.
Yeah.
That's just me. I guess everybody's different, but it was very popular to, be professional up top and
Well, and
pajamas.
then like virtual tours ended up being really popular during that time. Museums and any destination that could do that started to do that because people were logging in and people were getting online and touring museums they hadn't seen and creating dream bucket list of where they wanted to go.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Well, the remote education part was, that was rough because if your kids can't, like, Reese thought it was great, Alex. He really needs to be in person to learn. Like, and then they thought it was almost a joke. Like, we were so underprepared, like the school systems in general,
Hmm.
for to be learning online, and they weren't it was difficult. That part
Yeah.
absolutely was difficult. I don't know um how your child learns, but if you had a child that was that it was a 2 years easily. 2
Mhm.
full years for online learning, and that's a lot. That's a
Yeah,
lot.
which is why we chose to homeschool the next year instead of sending to remote. We created a Corona pod and a couple families got together and pulled their kids for that year and we homeschooled them. They were high schoolers mostly, so
And it's
their
difficult
own.
in high school to, well, I mean, it was difficult for all of them. It was
Yeah,
difficult for
absolutely.
all children. I do
Still
feel.
feeling the effects.
I think so. I think we absolutely are. I think we lost some education there because not everybody's able to do that online. But the other huge thing in the beginning was cruise ships, like that were out to sea. I listened to a couple of them where they're like, one was on their honeymoon and it was like a 10-day cruise and they were out in the ocean for 30 days, but then the ports were all closing. So then this
Right,
other couple there, so they were out there they were quarantined for 2 weeks. And if you had an interior room, imagine like two parents and two teenagers or whatever, a kid in an interior room, and you're quarantined in there. They were like, they had to take shifts of when they could come out and get fresh air because it
right,
wasn't, and they were having to ship people's medicine on board. And it was a problem. And some cruises, because you're so in such close quarters, it was catching like wildfire.
right.
So that was very difficult. I don't know if you've been on a cruise during that time. Thank God I wasn't. I wouldn't want to be locked out at sea for 30 days. I don't think, not under those conditions. Um, because they weren't even like, the buffets weren't open. You got a very scaled down menu of what you could
Yeah.
eat. You know what I mean? So and this is another thing that you probably didn't think about. They were bringing in nicotine patches for people that were smokers because
Oh,
they couldn't, there's no more once you ran out, you're quitting now. You're
yeah.
officially quitting.
I wonder how many people actually were able to take advantage of that and be like, "All right, this is my call to quit." I
Right?
didn't know that. Think about that. Yeah. I
Yeah.
do know that the cruise ships and they were in the travel world, they were like really one of the first kind of hit with and not having any kind of idea of how to handle it because they're
Yeah.
stuck out there. Now there were people that got stranded in other countries as the airline shut down and we were trying to keep people where they were so to stop the spread. So it did change the policy and procedures of travel moving forward. Even to this day, we still see some of those things in place.
Well, right. And they had to get really flexible for a bit. Like their cancellation policy had to be like waived, and obviously future credit cruises. Like the one couple that they were on there for 30 days and it was their honeymoon, they gave them like 110% compensation for another cruise to go, and so they're like, for us it was fine because we are young and healthy, and we were able to, so they were then helping the older, because I guess the princess one was the one where they were out to sea for a long time and a lot of people died on that ship, because it was just spreading. But they were kind of like saying, like, if you're young and healthy, you can get this and you'll be fine. But if you're older or have autoimmune or respiratory issues, then those are the people that were really, really affected,
Mhm.
hit the hardest. So um I think that a lot of people had to cancel their trips and postpone them. And then we just were locked down for a while. So during that lockdown, I remember we talked to Maddie with RV share, and that's when you saw the rise of people wanting to just, they were like, we can't be locked in here forever, we have to get out and do something. So then that's when, instead of like all inclusives or cruises, people started getting creative and renting RVs
Yep.
and doing more camping and more outside stuff because
Visiting the national parks and going,
it
yeah.
got a huge boost. Absolutely. Yeah.
And then the policies and procedures where you mentioned cancellations and stuff, that's still they the industry, the travel industry still kept a lot of that the way that they handle cancellations and things. They're now better prepared for it. So they have more steps in place to protect against things like that. And a lot of that has stayed the way that they've handled that, which has been really nice. They have
Well, and if you were lucky enough, I shouldn't say lucky enough, but there was a point where after they were giving like great cruises and prices on cruising just to try to get people back in the market, you know?
Yeah,
And like
I
you
went
went
back.
on a cruise.
Yeah, in November of 2021. It was Thanksgiving actually. It was my very first cruise ever and it was super cheap. Like and it was on Princess, which I that was being my first cruise was I was spoiled. That they set the bar high because I really love Princess Cruise Line. Um, but it was an amazing experience. The ships weren't packed.
Because they had to follow protocol where,
Yes,
you
they had
social
limited
distancing.
protocol. We had an amazing cruise, but I also noticed other places like amusement parks and venues, they started limiting when we started open the world started opening back up, they were limiting the number of people because I know I went to Carolina Panthers game and we were sat it was just Daniel and I, and then the whole row in front of us was empty, the row behind us was empty, and then two seats separated 2 or it might have been 4 seats actually. I think it was 4.
Yeah, they were
Separated
doing a lot of
us
social
and the next
distancing.
group
That would have
of
been awesome.
it was absolutely because that was my second time going to a game, and I don't love it because I don't like the crowds, I don't like the seating, you're right on top of each other.
Right.
That was probably the best experience having that much space. I do wish we'd go back to respecting the spacing of all of that, where when you go to an event or you go to an amusement park, or I wish we did have a little bit more, um, control or what's the word I'm looking for? Cap on the number of people that were going, but the the experience itself, the way that they handled that, when we were opening back up, because we travel then in December of 2021, I traveled with students to Hawaii,
That's
um,
amazing.
from Charlotte, and that was interesting because that we were still dealing with,
And what,
COVID.
that was 2020,
That was 2021, December
2021.
2021.
So we were trying to come out of it at
Yeah,
that
but
point.
they still had COVID protocols, like, you
Sure.
had to either have your vaccination card or you couldn't go into certain places, you had to do the wellness, checks before you go into Hawaii. Even when we flew into LA, before we got to the airport, we had to fill out a health form before we landed. I think it was before we even took off, I don't remember it's been a couple years, I don't remember, but there were so many steps we had to take and add on to our
Hmm.
travel plans that and I took 80 we took 81 people on this
That
trip.
is so many. That is such a
So,
big, and
navigating
that's
that
before you were a travel agent,
that
right?
was before I was a travel agent. That
You
was when
could have
I
made
should have been getting paid for
so
a
much
travel agent
commission on that.
because I planned travel for years without being a travel
Same.
agent, getting paid
Hmm.
for it, but that was very interesting to navigate. I do like that they've kept a lot of the safety and sanitation policies in place.
Yeah,
To
that
this
is good
day,
too. Yep.
going to a hotel and knowing and seeing the remote control still wrapped because they've cleaned it and then they wrapped it, I feel like the sanitizing process has stepped up its game, when I travel. So I do appreciate that they've kept some of the procedures in place.
Right. Well, so, and then everybody had to shift to work from home setting. And you know who benefited the most out of that? Our animals, our doggos.
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
we, Riley, and I feel sorry, it is actually a thing. They got so used to having us be there that when people started going back, the dogs are like depressed. I feel so sorry for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a real thing, working remotely and navigating all of that. And I think a lot of places had to shift the way they did stuff, and then they weren't building houses, they weren't making cars, like a lot of production was shut down. So if you were in that industry, like a realtor, I mean, that had to have been a hard hit,
Well, we
for
had a
that
friend that
whole
was
staff.
buying and selling their house during the lockdown, and that was an adjustment for them. But yeah, there was a lot of things that kind of yeah, you saw where you could have trouble in certain careers because even the travel agents took a big hit because
Yeah.
people weren't traveling, canceled trips, that income you were counting on, like the hairdressers, anyone that worked on a commission-based style job, servers, it really hurt a lot of people and they're still recovering from that because that was
Sure.
at least a year's worth of uh, m change in their salary, in their income, so That was a big
It
thing.
was good to see people getting creative though with as far as like, oh, there was a lot that instead of dining in, it was all order out. You know what I mean? You just had your food brought to you, or you went and pick it, or it was pickup. You know what I mean? They found a
Yeah.
way to, even though they didn't have customers in their seats inside, they found a way to pivot, and that's
Right.
important in a
And that was a
business.
big deal when we were traveling, especially to Hawaii, because they did still have rules in place where certain restaurants you couldn't come in unless you had their had a vaccination. So we had to like order food to be delivered to our hotel, or we had to eat at the food trucks, or we would go out and get food for as a group. Like we had to plan differently. So it was a lot of adjustments and things,
Yeah,
but I
definitely.
feel like the industry is bouncing back. We had a big travel boom from 21 to 23.
Yeah,
Like
the
people were
revenge
like,
travel.
let's go, let's get back
Yeah.
out. A few words when I was looking up some information, some statistics about the travel industry for this episode. I hadn't heard these, but maybe you had. Oh, let me see. What was it called? Biz travel or bizcation, I think is what it was. For it was like business travel slash vacation. And
Because they
then
were letting everybody work from home, so people were taking advantage of that. Like,
right.
if I'm gonna work from home anyway and I'm gonna be on Zoom, then why not be at the beach? And
Yeah. Where was that? And then people who had been planning like their bucket list trip, they were actually taking those trips that I think we all realized we can't keep saying, well, one day we'll go, or, when we retire, we'll go. People were like, let's go now. We don't know
we're never
when we're
promised
gonna,
tomorrow.
yeah. And that was such a shock being locked down for so long. And people were
Hmm.
like, I'm getting out, I'm taking these trips. So we did see a boom in the travel industry, 21 through 23. And it's still kind of trending that way. We
Well,
Oh, go
what
ahead.
I think, what I noticed is when everybody did come back, it kind of worked out for us as travel agents, because I think that people were realizing there were, well, first of all, there's always going to be scammers out there. So when people are starting to travel again and get back in, get planning these trips, some people, they were not getting the trips that they thought they were getting. And so people started saying, hey, well, if I am going to go, if I'm taking this bucket list challenge, you know what? I think I maybe need a travel agent, because I'm not planning this all to specs with all of the, because different countries have different protocols and you had to have
Yes.
different certain vaccinations. And so that became a little more challenging for the average Joe to book travel. So I think that's when people did start reaching out to travel agents to come back to be like, okay, here's where I want to go. What do I need to do? What vaccinations do I need to have? What is the protocol? So I think that in as an industry of travel agents, that kind of did help us, around 22, 23, because people were like, I'm getting out and I'm traveling, but I need a little bit of help and guidance to do that. So,
And I think the pricing changed. The way travel was priced was different. We had a When we first opened back up and everybody was traveling, the industry was just trying to get people back in, the
sure.
destinations, the
So there were
cruises. So there were
discounts.
some
Yeah.
deals. When the boom started, supply and demand kicked in, and you weren't getting those great as good deals. And especially and this is still accurate to this day, last minute deals on like cruise lines and things are not as popular
Prevalent.
as they
Yeah.
used to be. Prevalent. Yeah. It used to be where you could be like, all right, the ships aren't always full. I can usually maybe check it out a week or two before and get a good deal if you were flexible in your travel like that. There are still some of those out there. However, they're not as
There
there's not an abundance of them as there used
Correct,
to
because
be.
people
And
are proactively booking out like a year out. And
yes,
so there's not supply and demand. You're not going to find those heavily discounted rooms, because you're lucky to be getting, if you're booking 2 or 3 months out to try to get on a cruise ship these days,
yes.
you're lucky.
Especially if you're traveling with a group, even and a group is
Right.
if you're trying to get two or more cabins, you are going, especially if you want them close together on the same floor, you've got to book further out.
Yeah,
It's
you
very
really
hard.
do.
I have a harder time booking my group trips on the cruise 3 to 6 months out versus a year to 18 months out. Like And the
Yeah.
cruise lines are stepping it up. They're releasing their dates further out so people can plan better, but those dates go so quickly. Um,
Yeah. One thing I will say, rail bookers, you can book 2 years out with rail bookers. So, so if you like to be really prepared,
and
rail
plan
bookers
those
is one.
big bucket
They're one of
trips.
the few. I don't know many other companies that will book 2 years out and secure
Yeah.
your seats and all of your travel arrangements. So, shout out to rail bookers on
Yeah. And
that.
you had mentioned earlier about working from home and stuff, and remote work and the digital nomad lifestyle boomed during the pandemic. I mean,
Yep.
it really became the go-to. A lot of people were working from home, those that could did.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would rent that RV. They would go out to the national park. They'd go out to the beach and they'd work from there so that they could be out of their home, but they were still getting their work done. And I'd say that that's still a thing people like to do. But I will, one of the things, the destinations, the hotels, the all inclusives, all of them kind of caught on to that trend and they stepped up their game. They created space for digital nomads, people, so that they would have a nice place to sit and work with their computer. They would offer advanced or higher end Wi-Fi kind of thing. These places caught on and they kind of definitely tapped into that market and were catering to those that wanted to travel while working. And
Yeah.
it became a big thing. And it's still, a lot of places still have those um features and what's the word, amenities. And I think it's a great thing because we work remotely and we travel a lot when we work. So it's
Yeah,
really
yeah. I
nice to have
think
those
that the
perks.
businesses had to pivot to be able to still function. And you do see a lot of people still working remotely, more so
Mhm.
than I don't know that we'll ever go back to a brick and mortar setting. A lot of companies are just going to see that you were able to function and not pay the overhead of having an office. I think it just depends on the business. But I think
Well, and
that
workers are also, employees are like, look, I saved money by not having to commute to
commute.
work,
Mhm.
deal with my food. Like I know I can bring it from, like there's a cost to drive to work or to get to work, whether you're driving, taking public transportation or whatever. The environment was better because we didn't have as much pollution.
Mhm. Yep.
So all around there were a lot of positives, and I
I
understand.
wouldn't wanna go back and do it again.
No, I mean the things that
But I
we
do think
kept
not
from it.
all bad came out of it, yes.
Yeah, we learned a lot about what we can handle, as a people. We learned about what we can't. So w-
Well,
the
and a huge shout out to the healthcare workers that were working around the clock, 24-hour shifts, like,
yeah,
that they embraced the fact that it was a crisis and they just do what they know to do. But I can't even imagine being in their shoes. So huge shout out to them because
right.
not everybody has the same gifts as other people. So they really were miracle workers for sure.
And speaking of that, like one of the things that also started to rise and became a big trend when travel really picked up again was wellness travel. People
Yes.
really started taking care of their mental health, their physical health, in the sense of not just outside of exercising, but just being more mindful in themselves. And that became part of their travel, their trips, they were intentional in where they were going. So wellness travel became a lot more popular, and a lot of
Mm.
places really stepped up their game there and offered, and we had did an episode on this as well. So if you want to know more about wellness travel and all the amazing things that are out there, make sure you check that episode out. But that became really big.
Hmm.
And people became more intentional in their travel. Like you were saying, they're either planning and grabbing those cruises that are usually filling up a year out. They're making those plans now. And then they are going. They're not waiting. If it's a trip they can take this month, a lot of people are going out and about and taking it and not putting off the travel as much.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And traveling with sustainable companies is definitely more relevant now and prevalent. Virgin Voyages is known for being a very eco-friendly, clean cruise line. Very little trash, and then the hammocks are a resource, and the recyclable bands are all um, definitely a very green company. And I think people like that. People will go to Virgin Voyages with the understanding that, well, not only is it an adults only cruise line, which is amazing, But they're very green and they care about their carbon footprint on the world. And I think that's, I think more companies are stepping up and doing that as they should be. So shout out
Do
to
you feel that as a whole, like the industry is pretty much bouncing back, like with the airlines and the hotels, and are our staff back? Are we seeing shortages there? How's our customer service in the industry as a whole? Like, are we back to where we were? Are we ever going to get back to where we were? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I feel like we've pretty much bounced back. I don't know that we'll ever be back to where we were before, because the world's not the same world as it was
Right.
pre-pandemic, and we can't change that. We can only just move forward and it is what it is, and do the best that you can with what you know now. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty much bounced back. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
I think financially, probably for those companies in the most part, but I do think the staff shortages are still an issue and across the board in a lot of things, not just in the travel industry, but across the board. I feel like some companies found they could run with shorter numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should, because I do
Right.
think customer service has become an issue on both ends. I think the customer service there, they went through a lot during the pandemic. If you worked in the customer service industry, if you worked in a people facing industry, period,
Yeah.
both sides got burned and burned out. And then now coming back, there's less patience on, I think the customers can be just as bad as the customer service. And we don't give as much grace. We don't have as much patience. It's a lot of, and I think part of that is people have an issue with, hey, this may be taken for, I might not be able to do this. It's going to be, something's going to happen. Like part of that, I think could be, what's the word I'm looking for? A fear left over from the lockdown, but that doesn't excuse a lot of behavior. I think also some of the policies in place, things that these companies are initiating are irritating their customers. And we got to look at it as a whole and navigate that and figure it out. But
Like
yeah, I think
Southwest
5 years later,
Airlines,
we're still
no free
figuring out.
bags now. No free bags.
I was trying not to call out Southwest because we just talked about, like, it just announced this week, and we in our travel
Well,
industry
people are
are,
upset because
they are,
that
yeah.
was a reason that people flew Southwest, was because of the free bags. And now that, I mean, I listen, I wonder how that will impact them.
We'll
So
have to
yeah,
see,
that's
yeah, because
something to stay tuned for, and we'll have to.
it's not been good on the socials. People have not been
No, people are
very
pissed.
appreciative of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I've seen that across the board in these industries where they've had to change some of that for whatever reason. I mean, the economy, the cost of everything is going up. So I don't know. I'm not a financial person when it comes to that. I don't think in that brain, so I can't tell. But I would hope it's more because they had to and not because they could, but who knows? We'll see
Yeah.
how that plays out. So what do we think's next for travel? What do we think it's gonna look like in the next 5 years? We're 5 years post COVID right now, post lockdown. What do we think it's gonna be like in 5 years?
Well, I mean, I'm hopeful that it's gonna continue. I hope there's not another pandemic. I
Right.
hope I think I'm thinking positive things. I hope that we continue to work towards being green, having a smaller footprint,
Mhm.
um, choosing those travel companies that are making an effort to be green, and I don't see travel going anywhere. Everybody loves to travel. I mean, that's what we do. Work hard so that we can go on vacation and we can relax. And I don't see that changing. People love travel as long as we can still, as long as we're still friendly in other parts of the country with other
Yeah.
parts of the country, as long as they still like us and we're allowed there.
Right.
I think that I look forward to traveling abroad still. What are your thoughts?
I think I hope people are out there traveling. I hope they are taking the adventure. I hope they're taking the trip.
Yep.
I really, even if it's an hour drive, I hope that they go out and explore that part. I hope things change where you don't have to worry about crossing the state lines in the US and things like that. I think that's something you and I have discussed that I'm curious to see how that's
Well,
going
as
to
a
be.
travel agent, and I do a lot more like cruises, international, like travel abroad, and you have to worry about now with, that and where it's safe to go in different countries. But now, even in the US, like you do a lot of national park trips and within the United States, and you
Well,
have
I
your
do a
own theme
lot of
parks.
domestic travel. Because I love, and we have a huge country, and we should be proud and go see it. However, like you said, when we have our clients go internationally, we have to learn and advise on the laws and the culture there,
Yeah.
and know that it's a fit. Now, because I do a lot of domestic travel, I have to be cautious of where I'm sending my clients. Are they safe, accepted, and welcome in the state that they're going to in the US? So I
Yeah.
have to treat each state as it's an individual country because they are making up their own culture. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say making up their own culture. They're creating their own culture. And it's not a united. You can't just drive across state borders anymore and be expected to be treated the same. So I have to be aware of that when I am working with my clients who want to travel within the states.
Yes. And we are allies. We are very inclusive.
Yes.
So this is stuff that we think about as travel agents. And I think in this day, in this climate, that you have to be mindful. So I think,
Yep.
I mean, just know where you're going, just as if you are traveling abroad, know where you're going.
Absolutely. I think you have to do that in the States. That would probably be my recommendation now. No matter where you're traveling, whether it's domestic or international, you need to know your destination, your final destination, and what the culture is like there.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I think that about wraps up. You have any other takeaways? I'm glad that we are where we're at. We survived.
We have to be positive, and we love travel, and we want everyone to travel, and um do your research. We just want to make sure you guys are aware of everything that's going on, and make sure you know the places, the locations you're going to. If you're looking for wellness, there are places out there. If you are wanting to be green, there are places out there. If you're a digital nomad, there are places you can go that will cater to that have amenities to fit those needs. So I
Yeah,
think there's
and if you
travel for
don't
everyone.
know and you don't want to do the research, then reach out to us because
Yes,
we
absolutely.
that's our whole job is to know. That's what we
Yeah.
train on every day of our lives. We're constantly getting new information and so yeah, reach out to a travel agent if you are uncertain and want guidance.
Yeah, but just keep traveling because it is worth it. It is fun, and we don't ever want to not be traveling again. So,
Correct. We always want to be able to travel.
yeah.
And and that's where we're going to leave that. So I hope that this was an eye-opening and then reflect, where were you and are you in a better place? We'd love to hear your thoughts, and if you have any special COVID stories that you want to share, we'd love to hear those too.
Bye, guys.